Early this year, I finally finished Tales of Berseria. It was good, I enjoyed it a lot. But between work and other obligations, it took me a while to get there. As I sat back and watched the ending credits roll, something came to mind. Out of curiosity, I checked the game's Steam achievements. Berseria has an achievement called Velvet Crow. This pops up right after defeating the final boss of the game. For all intents and purposes, it's the "You finished the game" badge. And as of the making of this video, only 18.7% of those who bought it got achievement. That number surprised me because there was a time when finishing a game felt like a badge of honor, hard-earned victory. Seeing the words "the end" or watching those pixelated credits roll felt like climbing a mountain. Not everyone got there, but if you did, you remembered it. Seeing that achievement made me realize that maybe things have become different. More and more players are bouncing off games before the halfway mark. Some barely make it past the tutorial. And I'm not talking about bad games here. I mean massive, critically acclaimed titles. Games that dominate Game of the Year lists. And yet, a surprisingly small number of players ever see them through to the end. This shift from finishing games to just dabbling in them, it didn't happen overnight. It's been quietly building for years in the background of an industry that's ballooned in size and ambition. Listen, I've been gaming since the 1980s. I remember when finishing a game wasn't just something you did, it was the point. So let's talk about it. Let's unpack how we got here, why game completion is on the decline, and what it says about how games and gamers have changed across the years. The first single player game I finished was this. For those who don't know, The Goonies is a side-scrolling action game released for the Famicom, based on the movie of the same name. Curiously, while it was an adaptation of an American movie, it was never released in North America, although Nintendo published an arcade port of it for their VS system coin-op cabinets. You play as Mikey, played by Samwise Gamgee in the movie, who's in a quest to rescue his fellow Goonies from the clutches of the Fratelli brothers. Modern players won't find the game particularly hard, but for a 10-year-old who didn't have access to the internet or gaming magazines back in the day, it was frustrating. You only have at your disposal a life bar, two extra lives, a kick, bombs, and later on a slingshot with limited ammo. As with most Nintendo games back then, there's no option to save, so you better finish the game in one sitting. And oh, there are no continues. It took me several weeks of dying and level memorization, but one afternoon I finally finished the game. I was so stoked that I jumped on the couch right beside the window to shout my accomplishment to my best friend who lived next door. I felt really proud of myself for completing the game. It's become a core memory of my childhood. Before we start, let's talk about endings. Arcade games, that grandfather of modern video games, were designed for endless coin play, and as a result, the early ones didn't have a typical ending. Instead, they have a score loop. The whole point was not to finish the game, it was to get the highest score so you can have your initials proudly displayed for everyone to see for posterity, or at least until the arcade operator resets the game. So you have Space Invaders and Pac-Man that get increasingly more difficult the further levels you reach. The early video game consoles, the Odysseys, the ColecoVisions, and yes, the Ataris, largely took their cue from the arcades. Developers wanted players to replay games over and over, mastering every pattern, every jump, every little bullet pixel that an alien boss sends your way, still racking up that high score like a madman. Endings were an afterthought, if there was one at all, and you just loop back, like some pixelated Groundhog Day, only harsher each time. After the North American video game crash in '83, home video gaming was put on the wayside, at least in the US, until Nintendo revived it with the NES in 1986. A lot of the early titles were still adhering to the arcade roots, but the more advanced technology now meant that games can become bigger, more cinematic. While gamers would still be targeting high scores, this also meant that games can now become vehicles for storytelling, and stories need endings. Games were still Nintendo hard, of course. Arcade roots run deep, but now beating them meant something. You didn't just get to the end, you earned it. The ending is now a reward for spending weeks mastering the game. It's not just about scores anymore, it's closure. So then what happened? What caused this shift in gaming habit? Well, everyone will have their opinions, but I think the change is largely due to three key reasons, and each one is inextricably linked to the others: the shifting generations of gamers, time, and the current landscape of modern gaming vis-a-vis modern entertainment and media. Allow me to explain. While it might seem like the gaming industry has been here forever, it's actually only a little over 50 years old. 40 if we are to take the emergence of the NES as the start after the North American video game crash of 1983. This means that the cohorts of Gen X and the early millennials were the first ones to experience this relatively young entertainment medium. And as someone who was there to experience it firsthand, let me tell you, we devoured every bit of it.
Awesome.
I mean, there's this new, exciting tech, and we made sure to experience every little bit it had to offer, and that means finishing games through to the end. There was also the financial aspect. If you were a kid in the 80s, you had to depend on your parents to buy you games, usually only during birthdays and Christmas. That means you had two or three cartridges, and that was your entire library for months, maybe even years. You learned those games inside out. You finished them because, well, that's what you had. The current generation of gamers, though, grew up with the industry already established. To them, video games are as ubiquitous as movies or music. They have no sense of it being novel. After all, it has always just been there. Finishing one doesn't give the same feeling of urgency or accomplishment like it would have if they were invested like we were when the medium was new. I mean, think back to when you finished Super Mario Bros. Or Contra for the first time. You were probably the first in your block to do it, or one of the few in school who did. That was bragging rights. There was no social media or YouTube to see what the ending was, so the other kids would have to take your word for it. And they would be jealous as you tell them what happened. Spoilers be damned. And then there's the issue of time. The kids who started gaming in the 70s and 80s are in their 50s and 40s now. They would be working, raising families, juggling responsibilities. Sitting down for an 60-hour epic isn't always realistic. When we were kids, we had all the time in the world. Now, time is the one commodity we don't have. We'd be lucky if we could play 2 hours each day after work. But indie, you say, surely today's kids also have all that free time just like before? Well, yes, and also no. Back in the day, games were short. Get good enough and you can finish a game in one sitting. Fast forward to today and the gaming landscape is completely different. Games are longer. Some are massive, 40, 80, even 100 hours long. And that's just the main story. Open world titles in particular bombard players with side quests, collectibles, activities, and systems upon systems. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. These games are often beautiful, richly crafted experiences, but the sheer scale can be overwhelming. Some players burn out before reaching the halfway mark, others just drift away. And let's not forget how games today compete for our attention. We're in the era of digital abundance. Subscription services like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus offer a buffet of titles. Steam sales flood our libraries with games we may never boot up. And then there's mobile games. Gacha slop aside, there are endless free to play games that today's kids can download and try on their phones. Bite sized bursts of dopamine to satiate the ever decreasing attention span of the modern gamer. In this environment, how can one focus on a game, much less finish it? No wonder then that today finishing a game feels optional, like a bonus, not the goal. We don't have official data from the 80s or 90s, but modern platforms give us a window into how few people actually finish their games. On Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox, most major titles include achievements or trophies tied to completing the story. These numbers are publicly viewable and they're often surprising. Take Elden Ring, for example, one of the most celebrated games of recent years. While there is not one definitive achievement for beating the game as it has multiple endings, there is the Elden Lord achievement which you get for getting any of the common Elden Lord endings. On Steam, only around 23.8% of players have that achievement. On PlayStation 5, it's higher at 46.03%. Xbox number is lower at 37%. It's not just Elden Ring. Red Dead Redemption 2 has Endless Summer which you get for completing the epilogue. Steam 20.3%, PlayStation 38.73%, Xbox 38%. The Witcher 3, GTA 5, Hollow Knight, Silksong all hover between 15% to 29% completion rates. That means most players never saw the credits roll. And these are highly acclaimed titles, mind you. If these are the stats for the best games, imagine the numbers for the average ones. Services like SteamDB, PSN Profiles, and True Achievements aggregate these numbers. They pull from actual player data and paint a broader picture. Gamers are starting more games than ever but finishing fewer and fewer. So why does any of this matter? Is finishing games even important anymore? On one hand, maybe not. Games are personal experiences after all. You don't have to reach the end to get value. Some players might get what they want in the first 10 hours and move on. That's valid. But on the other hand, there's something to be said about seeing a game through. About committing to a world, following a story to its conclusion, and reflecting on the journey. That's when games really hit their emotional stride. That's when themes pay off. When you, as a player, feel closure. From a developer's perspective, low completion rates can be disheartening. Imagine spending years crafting an ending only a third of your audience will ever see. It's one reason some studios front load their best moments now. They know most players won't stick around till the finale. Culturally, it also changes how we talk about games. When fewer people finish them, it's harder to discuss endings, character arcs, or themes. Spoiler culture becomes more sensitive. Reviews and critiques tend to focus on the first few hours, not the whole experience. We become tourists in games, not residents. Maybe finishing a game isn't about checking a box or proving something. Maybe it's about something quieter. The satisfaction of closure, the reward of persistence, the feeling of living with a story long enough to see where it leads. When you finish a game, especially one that's been part of your daily life for weeks or months, it lingers. The final cutscene, the credits, the last note of the soundtrack, they all echo for a bit. And in that quiet, there's something beautiful. It's a different kind of memory, one that sticks not just because of what you played, but because you stayed. You gave the game your time, your attention, and you saw it through. And in a world overflowing with content and constant noise, maybe that kind of commitment, even to a digital journey, is worth cherishing. So if you finished a game recently, really finished one, maybe take a moment, let it sit, let it be something. Because in an era where so much is left unfinished, that might be more meaningful than we realize.